Welcome back to Wristwatches, and today we have the difficult task of trying to do an objective review of one of the most iconic pieces of the entire Rolex catalogue. Yes, we have the vintage GMT-Master 1675 from the late 60s. So ladies and gentlemen, today we are looking at what for many people is one of the ultimate grail watches. You can see by the dimensions here, this is a small Rolex box in cardboard, which means that this is a vintage GMT that we're going to look at. And the owner is lucky enough to actually have one of these wonderful little brochures. GMT Master, the pilot's watch. With the pilot there with his 18 karat gold GMT checking his instruments. This is basically summing up the whole point of the watch, with the Pan Am flight there in the background and the lovely two-tone, the full gold and the classic Pepsi bezels GMT. Wonderful stuff. Let's have a look at what's in this box. This is the small vintage Rolex box. It's always a huge advantage to have the full set for these watches. Obviously, as you can see, watch boxes have grown over the years, so this is quite small compared to what you get now with the big wooden boxes that you don't really use anyway. I've got quite a few. Shall we open it up? Let's have a look. And in here is a brilliant, well-used vintage GMT by Rolex. The first appearance of what is now a very famous colorway, and let's have a proper look at it to see what you think. And here we are with the first version of the GMT Master, in production for more than 20 years by Rolex. You know, try as you might, it is not easy to view this in an objective light, because this is a watch which has been written about in every watch magazine, on every watch blog, from a blog to watch to Hodinkee and Fratello and everywhere else. So it is a watch that you will have an opinion of whether you've seen it or not. The first thing that strikes you when you take it into your hand is the fact that it is very neat. The case without the crown guards is 38 millimeters, and it is a very slender 11 millimeters in height. So I can very well understand that this is very many people's grail watch. You have to be very careful when looking at these, because there are a lot of iterations. The faded bezels, faded creamy lume is very, very sought after, and you do have some Franken GMTs out there, so make sure you do your proper research, because this is an exquisite piece and the values are fluctuating wildly based on the years, and make sure you find out which is the version you want. You might not want the vintage slender one, you might want a newer version. So this is basically the 1675 from the late 60s. You can tell by the big arrow on the GMT hand. It's got the flat crown guards, which delineates the 60s models. The 1575 movement is non-hacking, which means that it's from before 1971. So I would say this watch, without checking the serial numbers, is between 1965 and 1970 roughly. Very nice patina on this. You obviously have little marks on the oyster bracelet, and you have little mark here on the hour index at 6 o'clock. Overall, superb condition. You'll always find a little bit of stretch and play in the Rolex bracelet. I have a suspicion this will sit really well on my arm. How does the GMT function actually work? Well, on these older models, the bezel is the famous first version of the Pepsi bezel as we now know it. So this is the Pepsi of Pepsi bezels. The bezel delineates the time for the red GMT arrow hand, and that goes at half the pace of the normal hour hand. So the red GMT arrow hands does a full circuit in 24 hours, not 12. Without touching the bezel, you can see that this watch, which I haven't set today, is 10 to 11, and it shows here that yes, it is about 10 to 11 in the daytime. The red field marks the 12 hours of daytime, and the blue part is to mark the 12 hours through the night. Hence, that's why the Pepsi bezel. So basically, to set it to a different time zone, say I go from Norway, I take a flight to London, setting the time back 1 hour, I just turn the bezel back 1 hour, and obviously simple enough, it's right before 11 o'clock here, it's right before 10 o'clock in London. Obviously the normal way is to have the red GMT hand as your home time and do it the other way around, so that the hour hand on the normal hour minute hand will show the time where you are. Brilliant. The classic Rolex Cyclops, the glass here is an acrylic crystal, so it will scratch. It does play beautifully with the light compared to a tough sapphire crystal. Those scuffs are incredibly easy to get out. Don't have to worry about that. The bracelet, I suspect, is very comfy. I'll try it on the wrist. Inside the watch is the 1575 movement. The 1575 movement was launched in the mid-60s, and this is a GMT from the late 60s. It needed a reliable, robust automatic movement. It's got a 44-hour power reserve, a frequency of 2.5 Hertz, 25 joules, and a neat 28.2 millimeter diameter. Looking back at the watch here, obviously the legibility is great. You have the classic vintage traits of same as a Rolex Submariner, a Speedmaster. What you notice is the fact that it is quite thin, and you might find that the dial might be lacking a bit in depth. But the super crisp printing, imagine standing up to the test of time for more than 50 years. This has obviously been well cared for and probably stayed quite a bit in its box, because you will see the distinct aging and very highly sought after creamy lume on these watches. This is still crisp and white. You can see that it has been worn, and it is in exceptional shape. Let's have a look at what it feels like on my wrist. With all my inert skepticism and the fact that you read so much about this watch, the fact that it is, for some reason, the owner has the same size wrist as me. It doesn't wear small, but the case without the crown guards being 38 millimeters means that it will sit perfect on any wrist. This is a 7.5 inch wrist mine, and you notice the 11 millimeters of height, making it very, very slender. It is supremely comfortable, and scarily enough, first time I took it out of the box, I put it on, and that's it. The comfort is absolutely brilliant. You do not want to take it off. It's so slender, it's got